All right. So I don't know about all of you. I've just been so inspired by our time together and thinking about these four possible futures and saying, okay, how might we use these constraints to create the best school experience yet? I love so many things that I've heard on sessions from people just sharing how people have essentially already transformed school and are committed to never going back. And I think that is I know everyone's tired. I know people are, it's been exhausting to leap into all of this, but I think recognizing your bright spots in your districts, things that you want learning to look like in the future, and supporting that, sharing that out is such a great thing to do. And just answering that question, we can if we what? So I would love to hear from you in the chat. How might we use these constraints to create the best school experience yet? I mean, just imagine, could we go into 2020, 21 and say, regardless of which of these four features we're facing or the combination of all of them, how could this be the best school year we've ever had in XYZ ISD? How can we make that happen? And I challenge you to take that on and to share it with your team and say, when you're in those meetings and you're doing your planning, say, hey, let's not be satisfied with getting through it. Let's set a goal for ourselves to make it the best yet and answer that question. We can if we what? If we what? What are those different things? And there are a lot of things I think that we could, we can fill in the blanks with. I've heard some really great things today, like people saying, for example, that their parent communication has never been better than it is right now. And they don't want to go back to the way it was before. No matter what happens, they want to keep having Zoom calls between teachers and parents because it's been fabulous to be able to connect with their families that way. And, we've had PTO nights for forever and, come up, parent nights at school, but now going to where they are, maybe that's a better way to communicate. Maybe that makes us better as educators saying, hey, let's go to where they are. Let's Zoom with these families. And maybe that's why we're not getting parent involvement. People are too busy, but what if we what if we look at it differently? So I think that's just one example. And there's so many more of how we can truly take the learning that we've had from this spring and really make this the best school year yet. I mentioned why I'm so passionate about this, and I just want to drive that point home. I think we need to show as public educators that we are doing the very best, they're getting the very best quality education experience that they possibly can by continuing to attend their neighborhood public schools. Again, whether that's virtual or in person, that we know how to do that really, really well. And so I've also heard people saying, our coaches are saying this too, that teachers are more willing and more excited than ever to truly differentiate and personalize for learners. So I've been saying, it's really neat how we've been trying to move really from a teacher-centered classroom to a learner-centered classroom for a long time. And I'll tell you what, as ineffective as it is to have a teacher-centered classroom in person, it is much less effective to try to have a teacher-centered classroom virtually. You literally can't do it. You can't control it anymore. You can't manage it virtually. And so this could be the time. This really could be the time that we see public education move from teacher-centered to learner-centered, which does two things. It puts learners in control of their own learning, which is the person that should be in control of the learning. And it gives teachers like a much more exciting role. This role of designer and coach, and instead of having to be a manager, that's a boring role. Managing is a boring role. So it moves them into a creative role. They get to be in the space of like truly coaching people and seeing those ahas and not just conveying information and trying to entertain them so they're not bored with it. So, I mean, there's so many school hacks that I've seen. I don't know if y'all seen them, but there's so many school hacks that, kids are, pretending to be on Zoom calls, and actually it's their background showing them working, but they're not there. Or they're, a teacher asks them a question and they have this, hack of they start to answer and then they just freeze and pretend like they're frozen, and then they don't have to keep answering the question. Like, it's like if we're asking them to play school virtually, they're going to be even more creative about how to get out of doing it, right? So we've got to give them meaningful work. And I think people are understanding that more than ever. So all the vision that we have for public education, it can really come true in this environment because we need to personalize. We have to put them in control of their own learning and give them the tools to do it. It has to be engaging, and they have to want to engage in it, or they're not going to, even if they're pretending to. So it's super interesting to see how maybe, this could be the time. This could really be the time that we make those leaps forward, because, the best inventions come from when people are desperate, and people are desperate right now. So, it's an opportunity, and as leaders in education, it could really become the tipping point in your district and in public education as a whole. So as a leader, you've got to encourage people though, right? Because leadership is about disappointing people at a rate they can tolerate. So, there's a lot going on, and it's hard for people to manage it all. And so as a leader, you have to encourage them and celebrate them and support them through that change so that they can, they can manage that well. So how do we do that? So supporting educators through change, there's a couple things here. One is you've got to know it's a culture-based solution. I loved hearing, which means systems thinking and thinking of the whole big picture, thinking about people's roles differently, thinking about behaviors differently. I love what we were just hearing actually on our district panel of people thinking about the librarian role differently now, and how they can use that librarian role to support folks because they're resourceful and they have all these things. Thinking of the assistant principal differently. Guess what? The assistant principal doesn't have a building to manage either. So how do you think about that role differently? How can they now be utilized in a way that's truly instructional leadership or coaching? It's awesome. Folks are talking about how they're, people that were driving buses are now setting up a call center to answer questions. They're teaching them how to use the LMS platform so that they can, be a help center. So it's how can you think about roles differently? It's a completely different approach of thinking, shifting the culture in a district and building that growth mindset with everyone across the entire district. It's not just the educators. Also, leaders influence culture by what they model, mentor, and measure. So you are a leader. If you're on here, you're a leader because you're trying to grow and you're trying to learn and you're trying to lead your district. So remember what you are modeling. Are you modeling collaborative, engaging, professional learning? Are you modeling that this is the culture that we want in our district? I know we had a culture workshop, and Chris and Albert were sharing that today. What are we modeling? And are we modeling, calm in the face of storm? Are we modeling that we can find opportunity in adversity? Are we modeling those things? So as leaders, finding those ways to say, hey, let's, ask those right questions. Can we make the best possible school experience yet within these constraints? Let's use it as a challenge. Are you modeling that with folks? Everybody, I was actually interacting with a leader virtually today, not from a district that's here, and just some of the pushback that this person was experiencing. And I was encouraging this person as a leader and just saying, when one person complains, that doesn't mean you change. That doesn't mean you change. You find a way to support them, but you don't let them push back on that. You say, no, we are going to do this well, and we're going to have expectations. How can I support you through that? That's what you do as a leader. So it's important what you model, what you're coaching, and what you're measuring. I think don't forget about recognition systems. During this time, more than ever, people need to be recognized for small and large things that they're doing. So setting up those recognition systems, making sure that people are getting acknowledged for the amazing things that they're doing, for customer service, for how they're spending time, supporting people, all the things that, the badging and everything that's in our eSuite system is great. But I'm even talking about systems beyond that. How can you set up some endorsement situations? How can you utilize social media for recognition systems, and really as a leader encourage that in your district so that people feel encouraged and they see that their efforts are being acknowledged? I think all of that is so, so critical. And then, truly shifting culture at scale requires intentional systems and coaching. Don't let your previous systems get in the way, right? We don't have to do things the way that we've always done them. We can't even do that. So how do we simplify? What are the things we take off the plate? What do we quit requiring? What do we stop doing as a curriculum and instruction department? How do we pare down or simplify what we're requiring in terms of professional development just to the things that they need right now? How do we, think about our systems differently to truly support this change at scale? Exactly, Sean, it's time to, strategically abandon some things. This is the perfect time to do it. I just wrote a blog about there's so many free resources out there, and it's amazing that people are providing all that. but don't use them all because those will overwhelm people. And by the way, they're not all aligned to the standards. So, just using stuff and bringing stuff to people. Tamika was just talking about how, there's several different platforms. They've moved several times to different platforms to get the best one. And her lesson learned was that's not always the best decision because people then are having to learn something new over and over. So how do we make sure that our systems are supporting this shift at scale? Because at scale is very different than a campus or, some pilot. This is a big deal. And then it requires you have to have coaching in place. I know that we heard some partners, and I don't, I don't blame them, I guess, for this stance, but saying like, we don't want to add coaching because that's adding something on. And when I heard people saying that, I was like, oh my goodness, the one thing you have to do through this is support people through change. So the one thing, if you want to give up everything else, but you can't give up that coaching, you've got to support them through change. So I think in our session today, we were talking about the virtual coaching. And one of the things I said is set up your schedule right now. And no matter whether it is in person, on site, or whether it goes virtual, it doesn't matter. And that's what we just heard from our district partners that we're sharing in this last session. It doesn't matter. That's a given. This is going to happen. You're going to get this support no matter what. That's going to be your anchor. It's going to be there. If we go virtual or if we're in person, doesn't matter. We're going to keep doing that. And I think that is so critical, that knowing that piece is going to be there is really important. If I were in a district right now, I might even consider wanting to do, let's say we start on site. I might even consider doing some of that coaching virtually, even while we're on site, just to get started with that, because I know it's probably going to end up that way at some point during the year. So maybe it makes sense to get used to that at the beginning, by starting it a little bit at the beginning. But setting up your coaching systems, I think, is just critical because people need that support through change more than ever. Also, obviously, I know that, with the economy being a little uncertain, people are worried about positions. And that's another reason why it's important to set up all of your positions to be supporting educators starting now. Do that with your librarians, like I mentioned, with your curriculum instruction folks. Everybody having a role like that, I think, is really critical. So those are three things that I feel like, based on everything I was hearing today, that made a lot of sense to close with today. We just launched a great website. Thank you, Ryan, and everyone actually on our team that contributed to content. Really appreciate that. But there's a new website page that we put up, and I just absolutely love it because it's just all the coaching timelines are up there. You can click through the timelines and see those touches and what those look like. And there's a lot of good resources on there. So please feel free to utilize any of that, even if you're not a partner. I think just being able to support these folks through this change and making sure that we have the best year yet is absolutely what we want to do. So, okay, so finally, how will you utilize all these resources? There's so much stuff, and where is it, etc. So I wanted to just leave you with these three things. There are three different ways that you're going to have resources. So, and we will send you an email. So also check your email, not just your snail mail. But three different ways we're going to send you resources. So one is the virtual learning page that if you go onto our website, engage2learn.org, you will be able to sign up for eNet if you have not already. I think everybody on here is signed up. And that page is going to continue to get populated. Like this team, as you might imagine, is like constantly churning out resources, and we're going to be putting more and more stuff on that page. And so you'll have access to that as an eNet member. It's free to anyone who is an educator. You have to be an educator in a district, but there's going to be more and more. We already have plans for all kinds of resources this summer. I can't wait till we launch our Life Ready Skills. We're going to put all that on there too. So very excited about that. If you're a partner, we have eSuite. It is searchable. As you know, if you go to ePLC, you can find any of the resources from today, or just search for things like virtual learning, because there are a lot of new resources that districts and our team has been putting up constantly this spring. So there's lots of good stuff on there. If you're not a partner, then just reach out. eSuite is not expensive, and it's kind of the one-stop shop for everything. The other thing is we're going to be offering out office hours, because we tried to customize this as much as possible, but I know that there's probably still some lingering questions, or maybe you're asking the question, hey, can you just help us organize how we're offering out our PD? Several of you have LMS systems and you're organizing it that way. notice that we don't have an LMS that we were using for this, and it's still pretty organized, I would say. And so we have systems ourselves that if you don't have an LMS, we can share that with you too. But we're going to send out, when we send out the email follow-up, some office hours, and that will be an opportunity for people to just sign up and get some individual, customized free coaching on anything that's right now you're trying to work on that you're like, wait, I need more help with this. So we'll have folks from our team that are helping districts right now, and whether you're a partner or not, we want you to have some customized time to answer those questions. I just want to close by saying this is a collaborative learning experience, and Unconference is not just about people that prepared to bring things to share, but it's also about everyone who attended. And so this, I feel like, was a huge success, and a lot of that is because of what you brought to the table, no matter who you are. Thank you so much for coming and attending, because your attendance, your collaboration, your sharing, your thought partnership is what made this so valuable. So thank you for being here. You made it better for sure. And there's so much that, we all shared, everyone on here, everyone that's doing the hard work of preparing for 2021 is inspirational, and all of your ideas have been so valuable. So we also crave your feedback. Please help us get better. And to do that, we need you to